Welcome to Zoe Stories. Grandma's Secret Dress Shop Legacy. I remember the day the lawyers walked into my life as if it were yesterday. The rain was relentless that morning, drumming against the windows of the law offices of Sherman and Vicks like an ominous warning. I hadn't expected them to be so predatory. Sherman, tall and thin, with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through everything I thought I knew about my grandmother's will. And Vicks, the shorter, round-faced one, with cheeks that jiggled as he smirked in a way that made my skin crawl. Together, they were like vultures circling a carcass, and the carcass in their eyes was my grandmother's estate. "You're Alexander Quinn?" Sherman said, voice low and precise, like a snake ready to strike. "We understand you're contesting Ms. Winthrop's will." I gritted my teeth, forcing my emotions down. "I'm not contesting anything. I'm clarifying. I've cared for my grandmother every day for 30 years. She has no granddaughter. I've run her shop, paid her bills, helped her with everything. This estate should be mine." Sherman's thin lips curved into a wicked smile. "Ah, but the will is explicit. It names a granddaughter. If no granddaughter can be produced within 1 month, everything passes to our offices. Dress shop, personal estate, assets, every last penny." I felt a cold dread settle in my chest. "That's impossible. She never had another child. I've been the one here all these years. I don't understand. Why would the law favor strangers over family?" Vicks leaned back in his chair, fingers laced over his round belly. "The law doesn't concern itself with devotion, Mr. Quinn. It only recognizes the letter. And the letter, unfortunately for you, names a granddaughter. So unless she appears," he smirked, letting the threat hang heavy in the air, "we inherit everything." I clenched my fists, trying not to let my anger show. My grandmother had been sick for years, and now, even in death, it seemed the vultures had come to circle. My chest tightened, my jaw ached, and I felt a surge of helplessness that almost made me stagger backward. I can't find her." "She doesn't exist," I said, my voice shaking, though I tried to sound firm. "Ah, Mr. Quinn," Sherman hissed, leaning forward, hands flat on the desk, his nose pointed like a hawk. "That's the dilemma. The wording of the will matters more than devotion, more than decades of care. You see, if you cannot present a granddaughter within 1 month, everything legally passes to us." Vicks chuckled, the sound wet and predatory. "A happy coincidence, wouldn't you agree? If nature has not produced a granddaughter, the shop and the fortune will be ours. It's unfortunate for you, yes, but that is the law." I stood there, frozen, 1,000 thoughts rushing through my mind. My grandmother had trusted me with everything, and now, these two men with beady eyes and crooked smiles were attempting to strip it all away. I wanted to scream, to fight, to throw something at them, but I knew it would only make me look desperate. Instead, I turned on my heel and stormed out, the sound of my soaked shoes slapping against the marble floor echoing in the empty hallway. Outside, the rain had intensified. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, the water soaking through and chilling me to the bone. Every step back to the dress shop felt heavier than the last. Every puddle I splashed through reflected not just my soaked face, but my fear and frustration. Halfway there, I imagined Sherman and Vicks already walking through the shop, touching fabrics, counting coins, claiming every last item as their own. The thought made my blood boil. How could people be so heartless? So greedy? They didn't know my grandmother, didn't know me, didn't know the history embedded in every seam, every fold of the dresses we had made together. Finally, I reached the shop. The familiar scent of lavender and linen greeted me, a soft reminder of home and safety. My hands instinctively reached for the door, fumbling with the wet lock. As I stepped inside, the warmth hit me like a wave, and for a moment, the storm outside and the threat of the lawyers faded. Rows of dresses stretched across the room, each one a memory, each one a fragment of my grandmother's life. Satin, silk, lace, they weren't just clothes, they were stories, pieces of her heart stitched into fabric. I ran my fingers along the racks, lingering over a red silk dress that my grandmother had once used in a showcase. I could almost hear her voice, "Treat every dress like it's a masterpiece, Alex. Because it is." Then, my eyes caught something familiar. A yellow sundress, soft cotton, embroidered with white flowers that cascaded delicately from collar to hem, a lace-trimmed neckline that seemed almost regal. I remembered Eleanor, my grandmother, talking about it, saying it was for someone brave enough to step into their truth, whoever that person might be. I felt my chest tighten. The dress was more than fabric. Something about it called to me, a voice I had ignored for years whispering in my mind. I lifted it from the hanger, feeling its weight and softness, and a shiver ran down my spine. Could it be possible that this simple dress, something my grandmother had treasured, could be the key to more than just the shop? Could it be the key to me? For the first time in weeks, I felt the storm inside me start to calm. The lawyers, the injustice, the fear. It all faded for a moment. Here, in the quiet of the shop, surrounded by fabrics and memories, I let myself imagine stepping into that dress. I could feel something awakening inside me, a secret part of myself I had never fully acknowledged. And in that moment, soaked from the rain and trembling with anticipation, I realized that the battle for the shop, for the inheritance, and perhaps for my own identity, was only just beginning. I stood in the middle of the shop, the yellow sundress in my hands, and my chest felt tight, not from fear, but from something I couldn't quite name. The rain outside hammered against the windows, a rhythmic reminder of the storm both in the world and inside me. I knew I had to do something, anything, to feel grounded. My grandmother had always said, "Fabric remembers everything. It knows who belongs to it." I had never understood that fully, until now. The sundress slipped through my fingers like water. I ran my hand along the delicate embroidery, tracing each flower as if it held secrets just for me. I thought about the lawyers, about their smug faces and their beady eyes, about the way they had said I had no claim, no right, because I wasn't some phantom granddaughter. My stomach twisted at the thought, but the dress seemed to call me forward, almost daring me to step into it. For a long moment, I just held it, breathing in the soft scent of cotton and lavender. Then, almost without thinking, I lifted it over my head. The fabric slid down my body, brushing against my skin like a gentle whisper. I froze, feeling the sensation ripple through me. My reflection in the tall mirror at the back of the shop caught my eye, and I barely recognized the figure staring back. The dress hugged my shoulders, flowed over my torso, and fell just above my knees. The lace at the collar felt tight around my neck, delicate and soft, yet commanding in a way that made my heartbeat quicken. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the reflection. I turned slowly, watching the dress sway around me, watching how the fabric responded to every movement. There was a strange thrill in it, a warmth that spread through me, a part of me I had buried for decades. I remembered all the afternoons I had spent with my grandmother, learning to thread needles, to fold hems, to pin patterns with precision. I had always been meticulous, careful not to ruin anything. And now, surrounded by her creations, I felt closer to her than ever, even though she was gone. Something inside me stirred, curiosity, excitement, and a fear I couldn't quite name. I had never worn a dress like this in my life, not openly. The few times I had tried on garments while alone, it had been secretive, almost shameful. But now, with the shop empty and the storm outside, it felt different. It felt like permission. Like my grandmother, somehow, had left me a key to unlock a side of myself I hadn't dared explore. I took a hesitant step, then another. The dress swayed with me, light and airy, and I realized I was smiling. A small, nervous smile, but genuine. My hands brushed along the sides of the fabric, and I felt a shiver of something deep and unspoken. Could this really be me? Could this really be the way I had been meant to feel all along? I spun slowly, watching the dress flare around my legs. The motion made me dizzy with sensation, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. My reflection, Alex, standing there in my grandmother's sundress, looked like someone I didn't know, yet someone I had always been. I laughed softly, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in years. The sound echoed in the empty shop, blending with the patter of rain against the windows. Then a thought hit me like a jolt. The lawyers. Sherman and Vix. They had said I had no right, no claim, because I wasn't a granddaughter. But what if this dress, this side of me, could give me the courage to fight back? Not with fists or threats, but with presence, with proof that the heart of the shop, and the heart of my grandmother, was mine? I looked around the shop, letting my fingers brush across racks of dresses and rolls of fabric. Each piece seemed to hum with memory, with legacy, with life. I could feel her spirit here, in every fold, every stitch, every delicate thread. And I realized that if anyone could understand the meaning of the dresses, it would be me. I had spent my life among them. I had held them, crafted them, preserved them. I was their keeper, their inheritor in every sense that mattered, except legally. I sat down on a small stool in the corner of the shop, letting the dress drape around me. My hands rested on my knees, and I let my mind wander. Could I truly embrace this side of myself? Could I let the dress, and the feeling of it, be a part of who I was? My heart pounded with a mixture of fear and longing. I had always hidden this part of myself, but now, with the lawyers threatening to take everything, hiding felt impossible. The thought of facing them, of proving my worth, no longer seemed as terrifying as the thought of denying who I was. The dress had awakened something in me, a courage, a defiance, a recognition that I was more than the lawyer's definitions, more than the legal paper that tried to diminish me. I was Alex. I was the caretaker of my grandmother's legacy. And I was beginning to see that the way I chose to present myself, the way I embraced my own identity, could be a strength, not a weakness. I stood up slowly, letting the fabric fall gracefully around my legs. I looked in the mirror again, really looked. The reflection staring back at me was both familiar and new. It was me, yet it was the person I had always kept hidden, the part of me that had always longed to exist without fear or judgment. The dress felt like a bridge, a path to something greater than myself, something that connected my past, my grandmother, and my future. A deep breath filled my lungs. The storm outside hadn't let up, but inside, I felt a quiet calm settle over me. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of alignment, between who I had been, who I was, and who I could become. I didn't know how I would face Sherman and Vix, or how I would secure the shop legally. But one thing was certain. I was no longer just Alex Quinn, the caretaker. I was Alex Quinn, the keeper of a legacy, and I was beginning to embrace the part of myself that had always been waiting, hidden in plain sight. And as the yellow sundress flowed around me, I realized that perhaps, just perhaps, this storm, both outside and within, was exactly what I needed to finally step into my own power. The storm outside had not let up, but in the shop, I felt a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the radiator. I ran my fingers along the yellow sundress one more time, tracing the delicate embroidery of flowers, and I couldn't help the small, guilty thrill that coursed through me. It was as if every stitch, every fold of fabric, was inviting me to explore a part of myself I had kept buried for years. I had always known I was different. Not in a way that others could see easily. Just a whisper inside me, a secret that lingered whenever I folded a dress, brushed my hands against a skirt, or helped my grandmother adjust a hem. I had tried to bury it beneath the routine of life, beneath the responsibility of being the caretaker, beneath the looming threat of losing the shop to those vultures in their perfectly pressed suits. But that dress, that simple yellow sundress, had awakened something inside me that I couldn't ignore. I hesitated for a moment, staring at myself in the full-length mirror. Alex Quinn. Me. But the reflection looked different. Softer, lighter somehow, the harsh angles of my face softened by the way the fabric hugged my shoulders and flowed over my frame. I raised my hands to touch the lace trim at the neckline, and the sensation made my chest tighten, not with shame, but with a strange, thrilling kind of exhilaration. I spun slowly, watching the fabric flare around me, and I laughed quietly at myself. This felt right. For a while, I just stood there, letting the dress drape over me, letting the hidden part of myself breathe for the first time. And then a thought struck me. If this side of me was real, if this part of myself was more than a fleeting curiosity, then I couldn't hide it anymore. Not from myself, not from the shop, and not from anyone who tried to take what was mine. I walked over to the mannequin in the corner, the one draped with fabric that I had never touched. My grandmother had always been secretive about it, saying only that it was for someone who needed to see themselves fully. My hands traced the curves of the mannequin, imagining what it would feel like to step into clothes that weren't just garments, but keys to an identity waiting to be unlocked. I could feel the energy in the room shift, as if my grandmother's presence was watching, approving, nudging me towards something I had been too afraid to explore. The idea of crossdressing, which had once been a whispered fantasy, now felt inevitable. I wasn't doing it for shock value, for attention, or even for rebellion. I was doing it for me. For the first time, I realized that embracing this side of myself wasn't about denying my responsibilities. It was about claiming a part of my humanity that had been suppressed. I moved deeper into the shop, letting my fingers brush against racks of skirts, dresses, and blouses. Each piece seemed to hum with memory, each fold and hem a story my grandmother had stitched into existence. I picked up a pale blue blouse, soft and flowing, with delicate lace along the cuffs. The thought of putting it on made my heart race. Would it feel as freeing as the sundress? Would I dare to see myself in it fully? I placed it on the counter and walked back to the sundress. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, letting the fabric flow over me, letting the sensation of softness, of curves, of lightness, seep into my bones. I couldn't help but think about Sherman and Vix, imagining their smug faces if they knew what I was doing in the very shop they sought to claim. The thought gave me a strange, mischievous courage. They could take the shop, try to claim the estate, but they couldn't take this. This freedom, this secret, this awakening. I would keep it as long as I lived. Hours passed, though I didn't notice. I lost myself in the fabrics, in the textures, in the memory of my grandmother guiding my hands as I learned to sew and fold and measure. Every stitch I had ever helped her with felt alive beneath my fingertips. The shop was no longer just a store, it was a sanctuary, a sacred place where I could be fully myself, where the world's rules didn't apply, where the lawyer's threats felt distant and powerless. And then the thought came, unbidden and daring, what if I could use this side of myself to confront the vultures? Not with legal threats, not with anger, not with screaming, but with presence. With identity. With proof that the heart of this shop, the soul of my grandmother's work, belonged to me, not by law but by essence. I walked over to the mirror again, examining myself from every angle. The sundress swirled around my legs, the lace at my neckline brushing against my collarbones. I raised my hands to my face, imagining what it would be like to present myself fully to the world, to step into the courtroom, to stand against Sherman and Vix not just as a caretaker, but as someone who had embraced the entirety of their being. A thrill ran through me that I hadn't felt in years, not since I first learned to sew beside my grandmother. I realized, with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, that this dress, these fabrics, this secret side of myself, could be my weapon. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was hiding. I felt powerful. The storm outside began to let up, but inside the shop, a different storm had begun, one of self-discovery, of courage, and of daring to embrace the forbidden freedom I had always craved. I wasn't sure how I would face the world, how I would face the lawyers, or even how I would confront my own fears. But one thing was certain, the yellow sundress had opened a door I could no longer close, and I was stepping through it, fully, boldly, and unapologetically. As the evening sun began to pierce through the storm clouds, casting golden light across the racks of fabric, I let myself smile. This was the beginning of something new. Not just a fight for inheritance, not just a struggle against lawyers, but a journey into my own identity, into the freedom to be who I truly was. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. I couldn't stop thinking about the sundress. Its weight, its flow, the way it hugged my shoulders and swirled around my legs. It had awakened something inside me I had spent my entire life suppressing. I wandered the shop, letting my fingers brush across the fabrics, feeling the softness and the history in every stitch. Every dress, blouse, and skirt seemed to whisper to me, urging me to explore further, to step fully into this hidden side of myself. I paused at a rack of skirts and tops that had belonged to my grandmother's personal collection. My heart raced as I imagined the possibilities, mixing, matching, experimenting. My fingers hovered over a delicate ivory blouse with lace cuffs and a matching pale pink skirt. The thought of slipping into them made my chest tighten, a mixture of fear and excitement pulsing through me. Could I really do this? Could I embrace this side of myself without shame or hesitation? I took a deep breath and, with trembling hands, began changing into the outfit. The moment the blouse touched my skin, I felt a shiver run through me. The lace at the cuffs was soft, almost ticklish, and the fabric flowed over my chest in a way that made me gasp quietly. The skirt slipped over my hips, light and airy, and I twirled slowly, watching it flare around me. My reflection in the tall mirror caught my eye, and I barely recognized myself. The person staring back wasn't just Alex Quinn, the caretaker of the dress shop. This reflection was someone new, someone daring, someone unapologetically embracing a side of themselves that had been hidden for decades. The thought made my pulse race. I had always been careful, always hidden, always polite. But now I felt alive. I spent hours experimenting, pairing blouses with skirts, testing shoes that had long been stored in the back closet, even trying on hats and scarves. Each new piece of clothing brought a rush of excitement, a thrill that I couldn't explain. It wasn't about vanity or curiosity. It was about discovering a side of myself that had always existed, waiting patiently to be acknowledged. And then I found it, the drawer in the back filled with accessories my grandmother had kept hidden. Hairpins, delicate gloves, necklaces, and even a few pairs of earrings. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I dared, but the temptation was too strong. I carefully pinned a few hairpins into my damp hair, adjusted a necklace, and slid a pair of small earrings into my ears. The reflection in the mirror now looked completely different, yet entirely me. I laughed softly, the sound echoing through the empty shop. No one could see me here, no one could judge me. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. The lawyers, the threats, the looming inheritance, they all seemed distant now. This was my space, my sanctuary, and for the first time, I could explore who I really was without fear. The hours slipped away, and I lost track of time. The storm outside had finally passed, leaving the world washed clean and glistening. But inside, another transformation was taking place. I was becoming someone new, someone brave, someone ready to face the world as I truly was. Then, a thought struck me, a daring, dangerous thought. The lawyers believed I was a scared, powerless man, someone who would cower in the face of their threats. But what if I could use this side of myself, this newfound confidence, to turn the tables? What if embracing who I truly was could become my strength, my secret weapon? I stared at my reflection for a long moment, imagining the courtroom, imagining Sherman and Vix smugly seated, expecting me to falter. I could feel their presence in my mind, their smug faces and predatory eyes, and a surge of defiance rose within me. I wasn't just a caretaker. I wasn't just a man hiding behind responsibility. I was Alex Quinn, and I was ready to claim my grandmother's legacy on my own terms. The thought made my chest tighten again, but this time with anticipation rather than fear. I moved to the back of the shop and began pulling more dresses and accessories, planning combinations, imagining the outfits I would wear when the time came. Each piece felt like armor, a declaration that I would no longer hide, no longer be silenced. As night fell, the shop was bathed in a soft, golden glow from the lamps. I stood in front of the mirror, fully dressed, fully adorned, and felt a sense of completeness I had never known. The reflection staring back at me was bold, confident, and unapologetically me. I smiled at myself, a mixture of pride and nervous excitement bubbling inside. I knew the road ahead would be difficult. Sherman and Vix would not give up easily. They would try every trick in the book to claim the shop, to claim the estate. But now, armed with my grandmother's legacy and a side of myself I had never dared explore, I felt ready. Ready to confront them, ready to fight, and ready to embrace who I truly was, no matter the cost. And as I stood there, fully immersed in the soft fabrics, delicate lace, and whispered memories of my grandmother, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This journey, this secret, this awakening, it was only the beginning. The shop was silent except for the soft hum of the old ceiling fan, spinning lazily above me. Outside, the city was dark, the rain long gone, leaving a chill in the night air. I stood in front of the mirror, dressed in a delicate cream blouse with puffed sleeves and a flowing navy skirt that reached just below my knees. A pair of my grandmother's vintage heels completed the ensemble. My reflection stared back at me, confident and poised, yet trembling with the adrenaline of what I was about to attempt. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of the skirt sway around my legs. I had spent hours experimenting, mixing fabrics, colors, and accessories. Every choice had been deliberate. Every piece of clothing, every hairpin, every necklace was a statement. A statement that I was no longer hiding, that I was ready to reclaim my grandmother's legacy, and that I would not let Sherman and Vix strip it away. The thought of the lawyers' smug, predatory faces made my stomach tighten. Sherman with his long, crooked nose, always sniffing out opportunity. Vix with his rounded cheeks and piggish smirk, thinking he could bully anyone into submission. They had underestimated me. They had underestimated what it meant to truly know the essence of the dress shop, to understand the soul of every stitch my grandmother had left behind. And most importantly, they had underestimated me. I moved to the back of the shop and retrieved a small box I had hidden earlier that contained my grandmother's most personal treasures: delicate lace gloves, a silk scarf, and an envelope I hadn't opened yet. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the scarf, feeling the softness between my hands. This scarf had been her favorite, the one she wore when she went out to meet clients or showcase her designs. To me, it felt like a talisman, a source of courage she had left behind. Then I took the envelope in my hand, feeling the paper's weight and the curve of the handwriting I had memorized long ago. To my dearest granddaughter, it read. My heart caught in my throat. For 30 years, I had been living as Alex, the caretaker, the nephew, the man everyone assumed I was. But this envelope, this dress, these fabrics, they were all pointing to something else. Something deeper. Something I had been afraid to fully accept. I opened the envelope carefully, my fingers shaking. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. The words were written in my grandmother's meticulous script. Sometimes, the dresses we make are not just for others, they are for ourselves. You must never hide who you truly are. One day, you will understand that beauty comes in many forms, and courage comes in embracing it. I held the paper close to my chest, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. It was as if my grandmother had known, had seen everything, and had left me this message to guide me. The realization hit me with full force. I wasn't doing this just to fight the lawyers. I wasn't doing this just to reclaim the shop. I was doing this for me. I spent the next few hours meticulously preparing. I styled my hair into soft waves, pinned it back with delicate hairpins, and applied a subtle touch of makeup that accentuated my features without being obvious. Every brushstroke, every adjustment, felt like armor being forged. I wasn't trying to disguise myself. I wasn't trying to fool anyone. I was becoming the person I had always been meant to be, stepping into an identity that was authentic and powerful. By midnight, the shop was quiet and organized, every dress hung perfectly, every fabric folded neatly. I took one last look in the mirror. The reflection staring back at me was a blend of confidence, elegance, and daring. A vision of who I had been all along but had never allowed to fully emerge. I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and whispered to myself, "You are ready." I knew the lawyers would not expect this. They believed they had me cornered, that the heir to Greta Hemsworth's estate was weak, timid, and powerless. But they had not accounted for the strength that came from embracing one's true self. They had not anticipated the courage that could be drawn from a lifetime of love, care, and dedication to the dress shop. The plan was simple, but daring. I would enter the courtroom as myself, fully embracing the identity I had discovered in the shop. No hesitation, no shame, no disguise. Just confidence and authenticity. I would present myself not only as the caretaker of the shop but as the living embodiment of my grandmother's legacy. Every detail had been considered. The dress, the accessories, the subtle yet deliberate makeup, the way I would walk, the way I would hold myself. I had rehearsed in front of the mirror countless times, imagining Sherman and Vix's reactions, imagining the judge's surprise. The thought of standing tall, finally claiming what was rightfully mine, sent a shiver of excitement down my spine. As I packed a small bag with necessary documents and the envelope from my grandmother, I felt a sense of purpose that I had never experienced before. The fear that had once dominated me was gone, replaced by a bold determination. I was no longer the timid Alex Quinn hiding behind duty and fear. I was stepping into a world where my identity, my courage, and my grandmother's legacy were intertwined, and nothing could take that away. Finally, I looked around the shop one last time. The dresses hung like silent witnesses, the fabrics shimmered in the soft lamplight, and the spirit of my grandmother seemed to hover in every corner. I felt a connection to her that transcended time and space, a reassurance that I was on the right path. With a deep breath, I straightened the yellow sundress once more, adjusted the lace at my neckline, and whispered, "Let's do this." And with that, I stepped out into the night, ready to face Sherman, Vix, and the courtroom that awaited me. For the first time in my life, I felt unstoppable. The morning air was crisp, carrying a hint of rain from the night before, but it didn't faze me. I walked into the courthouse with steady steps, the heels clicking against the marble floors. Each click echoed like a drumbeat in my chest, matching the rhythm of my anticipation. Today was the day. Today I would no longer hide. Today I would confront Sherman and Vix, not as the timid Alex Quinn, but as the confident, self-assured woman I had discovered in the quiet sanctuary of my grandmother's dress shop. The courtroom was larger than I remembered, high ceilings, dark wood panels, and rows of polished benches that seemed to stretch forever. People were already seated, murmuring quietly, their eyes flicking toward the podium where the lawyers would soon stand. And there they were, Sherman and Vix, leaning casually against the front of the room, their faces painted with smug satisfaction, expecting an easy victory. I stopped at the threshold for a brief moment, letting my gaze sweep the room. The judge's bench loomed ahead, and beside it, the empty podium where I would soon claim my place. My fingers lightly adjusted the lace cuffs of my blouse, smoothing the fabric over my wrists, and I felt a jolt of confidence ripple through me. This was it, the moment I had been preparing for. Sherman was the first to notice me. His sharp nose twitched, nostrils flaring as if he could smell the audacity radiating from me. Vix's cheeks puffed slightly, his smug grin faltering as his eyes widened. They hadn't expected me to appear like this. Not dressed, poised, confident, radiating a presence they couldn't intimidate. Your Honor. Sherman's voice rang out, attempting to regain composure. We are here to contest the claims of the late Miss Hemsworth's estate. The so-called granddaughter, if she exists, is clearly— He paused, glancing at me, searching for a hint of weakness. Misrepresenting herself. Vix stepped forward, trying to assert dominance. Yes, this individual is not the rightful heir. The documentation clearly states that if no granddaughter is found, the estate goes to the law offices of Sherman and Vix. It's a simple matter of legal procedure. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs. My heart pounded, but not with fear, rather with the exhilaration of standing tall in my truth. I stepped forward to the podium, the flowing skirt swishing softly around my legs. My hands rested lightly on the polished wood, steady and unshaking. Your Honor, I began, my voice calm, clear, and unwavering. I am Chelsea Hemsworth. I am Greta Hemsworth's granddaughter. I am the rightful heir to this estate, and I am here to claim what is rightfully mine. Not just because of legal documentation, but because of the legacy, love, and life my grandmother entrusted to me. There was a ripple through the courtroom. A few murmurs, startled gasps. Sherman's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. Vix's smug smile was gone, replaced with an uneasy flush. They had expected a timid, unsure man to appear, perhaps a frightened caretaker, struggling to navigate legalities. Instead, they faced a composed, elegant woman who exuded confidence and commanded attention without raising her voice. The judge adjusted his glasses, peering at me over the rim. Miss Hemsworth, he said, his tone measured, you claim to be the late Miss Greta Hemsworth's granddaughter? Yes, Your Honor, I replied. I lifted my chin slightly, letting my eyes meet his. I am Chelsea Hemsworth. I have cared for my grandmother, worked in her dress shop, and studied her legacy. I am not only her granddaughter by blood, but her heir by dedication and love. Sherman's voice cut through, sharp and incredulous. This is absurd. Her granddaughter died decades ago. There is no record of her surviving. I smiled softly, letting the calm confidence in my voice underscore every word. That record only shows what the world wanted to see, I said. But my grandmother knew the truth. She left me letters, instructions, and the dress shop itself. She understood who I was long before anyone else did. Her legacy, her life's work, and her love belonged to me. Vix fumed, attempting to interject, but I raised a hand, halting him mid-sentence. Let me finish, I said gently, yet firmly. My grandmother always valued courage, honesty, and authenticity. She designed each dress, each piece of fabric, with care and intention. I have carried that same dedication, not just in the shop, but in understanding myself and my place in the world. I am here, fully present, fully myself, and fully ready to honor her memory. The courtroom was silent now. Even the spectators seemed captivated by the unexpected confidence radiating from me. Sherman's eyes flicked to Vix, a silent communication of panic passing between them. They had underestimated me at every turn. They had assumed fear, weakness, and timidity, but instead they faced someone who had embraced her truth, who had taken the lessons of the dresses and woven them into her very being. The judge leaned forward, his hands folded over the desk. "Miss Hemsworth," he said slowly, thoughtfully, "the documentation is clear in its wording. However, it is evident that you are presenting yourself authentically, and that the estate's legacy has indeed been preserved by someone who has lived its values. I will need to review the letters and your grandmother's instructions, but your presence here speaks volumes." I nodded, a subtle smile curving my lips. "Thank you, Your Honor. I have everything prepared and am ready to provide any documentation, letters, or evidence required to prove my identity and claim." Sherman opened his mouth, but no words came. Vix muttered something under his breath, but it was too soft to catch. The momentum had shifted completely. The courtroom, once a place of intimidation and arrogance for the lawyers, now seemed to bend toward authenticity, truth, and legacy, forces they had never considered in their calculations. I took a deep breath, feeling the power of who I had become. I was no longer hiding, no longer timid. Every stitch of every dress I had worn, every moment spent exploring my identity, every secret hour in the dress shop, it had all led to this moment. I was Chelsea Hemsworth, heir and rightful owner of her grandmother's legacy, and I would face the world boldly and unapologetically. The storm outside might have passed, but inside me, a new storm had risen. A storm of courage, identity, and the unshakable conviction that I would no longer be defined by others' expectations. And for the first time, I truly felt unstoppable. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath as the judge leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on me with a careful mixture of curiosity and authority. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, yet instead of fear, a fierce clarity ran through me. I was ready. Every choice, every stitch, every secret hour I had spent in the shop had led to this moment. I was prepared to show the world the truth. I reached into my bag and retrieved the envelope from my grandmother, the one marked in her precise handwriting, to my dearest granddaughter. My fingers trembled slightly, but only from anticipation. The lawyers, Sherman and Vix, had grown quiet, their arrogance fading with each passing second. They were expecting a timid man, unsure and hesitant, but instead they faced a confident, poised woman ready to claim her legacy. "Your Honor," I began, placing the envelope carefully on the judge's desk. "Inside this envelope are letters and instructions from Greta Hemsworth herself. They clearly identify me as her granddaughter and heir, and they outline the intentions of her estate in full detail." The judge adjusted his glasses, leaning forward to inspect the envelope. He carefully opened it, pulling out the folded sheets of paper. His eyes scanned the words, and I watched as his expression shifted from curiosity to growing recognition of the truth before him. Sherman stepped forward, attempting to interject. "Your Honor, this is clearly—" "Silence, Mr. Sherman," the judge interrupted sharply, his voice echoing through the courtroom. "I will review this evidence without interruption." I took a steadying breath and turned to face the courtroom, letting the confidence I had built in the shop radiate outward. "These letters contain personal instructions from my grandmother," I continued, my voice steady and clear. "She entrusted me with her shop, her designs, and her estate because she knew I would honor them. She knew who I was and who I was meant to become. She understood me in a way no one else ever did, and she left this documentation as proof." Sherman's nostrils flared, and Vix's face reddened. They had spent weeks plotting, believing they could seize the estate, and now their plans were unraveling in front of their eyes. The arrogance that had carried them into the courthouse was gone, replaced with panic and disbelief. The judge held up a hand, signaling for calm. He read through each letter, each note, each instruction. The courtroom was silent except for the soft sound of papers turning. Every detail reinforced my claim, the careful notation of my grandmother's wishes, the specificity of my responsibilities in the dress shop, and the unmistakable acknowledgement of my identity. Finally, the judge looked up from the letters. "Miss Hemsworth," he said, his voice measured but firm, "these documents are compelling. They provide clear evidence of both your identity and your rightful inheritance. The intent of Greta Hemsworth is evident in every word. I felt a surge of relief and satisfaction, tempered by the gravity of the moment. I had spent so long in fear, hiding who I was, doubting myself, and suppressing my identity. And yet now, standing in that courtroom, I was fully visible, fully authentic, and fully validated. Sherman cleared his throat, attempting a last desperate argument. Your Honor, there must be a technicality. There is no living granddaughter on record. This cannot stand. The judge's eyes narrowed, his voice firm. The law is clear, Mr. Sherman. However, the spirit and intent of the will are equally important. Miss Hemsworth has provided irrefutable evidence of her grandmother's intentions and has presented herself authentically as the rightful heir. Your arguments are without merit. Vix shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Sherman for guidance. Their carefully constructed plan, built on intimidation and legal maneuvering, had crumbled entirely. They had underestimated not just my courage, but the depth of my grandmother's foresight and understanding. I took a deep breath and addressed the courtroom once more. Your Honor, my grandmother's legacy is not just in her estate or her shop. It's in the lessons she left me, in the courage to be who I truly am, and in the dedication to honor her life's work. I stand here not only as her granddaughter but as the living embodiment of her dreams and values. The judge nodded slowly, considering my words. He glanced at the lawyers, whose expressions had turned to frustration and disbelief. Very well, he said finally. Given the documentation, the testimony, and the authenticity of Miss Chelsea Hemsworth's presentation, I rule in her favor. She is the rightful heir to Greta Hemsworth's estate and dress shop. A wave of exhilaration and relief washed over me. The room seemed to brighten, the tension melting away as I realized the fight was over. The lawyers sank back in their seats, defeated and silent. The judge's gavel struck the podium, signaling the official end of the proceedings. I felt a mixture of joy and vindication. For decades, I had hidden, doubted myself, and feared judgment. Now, standing fully in my identity, I had not only claimed my grandmother's legacy but had done so on my own terms. Every stitch, every dress, every quiet moment of exploration in the shop had led me here, and it had all been worth it. As I turned to leave the courtroom, I caught the eyes of a few spectators who had watched silently. Some nodded with quiet approval, others smiled warmly. And in that moment, I understood the true power of authenticity. It was not just about claiming an inheritance or winning a legal battle. It was about standing tall, unafraid, and fully oneself. Walking out of the courthouse, the sun was breaking through the clouds, casting golden light across the city streets. I felt a sense of freedom unlike anything I had ever known. I was Chelsea Hemsworth, heir to a remarkable legacy, and finally, I could live openly and proudly as who I truly was. The journey had been long, filled with fear, doubt, and secrecy. But the reward, the knowledge that I had embraced my identity fully, honored my grandmother's legacy, and stood up to those who sought to undermine me, was more than worth it. And as I stepped forward into the bright light of a new day, I knew that my life was just beginning. Walking out of the courthouse felt surreal. The sunlight was bright, almost too bright after the dim, tense hours inside, but it was invigorating. I could feel the wind brushing against my face, a cool, freeing sensation that seemed to whisper, "This is your life now." Every step I took was lighter than the last, not just because the legal battle was over, but because I was finally stepping fully into myself. The dress shop had been quiet for weeks, closed during the legal turmoil, and I was eager, almost desperate to return. Driving there felt like a dream. The familiar streets of my childhood seemed sharper, more alive, each building, each tree, reflecting the reality of what I had fought for, a place to honor my grandmother and a place to honor myself. When I reached the shop, the door creaked open under my hands. Inside, it smelled the way it always had, linen, fabric, and a hint of old perfume lingering like a ghost of my grandmother's presence. The dresses hung neatly on racks, the mannequins still draped in unfinished creations. It was as though the shop had been waiting for me, waiting for the rightful heir to return and breathe life into it again. I ran my fingers over the fabrics, feeling the textures, remembering the countless hours I had spent learning from my grandmother. Each stitch, each pattern, each delicate seam told a story, not just of her talent, but of our shared journey. The shop had always been more than just a business. It had been a sanctuary, a place where creativity and care intertwined, and now it was mine to preserve and nurture. The phone rang, piercing the quiet. I jumped slightly before realizing it was the store line. I answered with a calm, confident voice. "Hello, Chelsea Hemsworth speaking," I said. "Chelsea. It's Margaret from the craft suppliers," a cheerful voice replied. "I heard the news. Congratulations. The shop is finally back in the right hands." I smiled, a flush of warmth spreading through me. "Thank you, Margaret. It's been quite the journey." "Oh, I can imagine. But now, the real work begins, doesn't it?" Margaret laughed. "Don't worry, you'll do wonderfully. Greta always believed in you." Hanging up, I let out a deep breath. The weight of the past month, the legal battles, the secrets, the fear, seemed to lift with every exhale. I was here. I was Chelsea. And I was ready to rebuild, restore, and revive the shop in ways my grandmother would have been proud of. I started with small tasks, the familiar routines grounding me. Folding fabrics, straightening the mannequins, dusting off the counters. Each action brought memories flooding back. I remembered how Greta had taught me to measure carefully, to cut precisely, and to treat each piece of fabric with respect. But this time, I approached it differently. This time, I was not just learning, I was creating. The first customers returned cautiously, curious about the shop reopening. Their initial surprise at seeing me, Chelsea Hemsworth, poised and confident, soon gave way to admiration. I welcomed them warmly, sharing stories of my grandmother, and slowly, the shop began to hum with life again. The fabrics shimmered in the sunlight that streamed through the front windows, the sewing machines clicked softly, and the energy of creativity flowed freely. One afternoon, as I worked on a particularly intricate dress, I paused to look around. The shop felt alive, infused with the spirit of my grandmother and the new energy I brought. I realized that reclaiming the shop wasn't just about ownership or legal triumph. It was about continuity, honoring the past while shaping the future. Every dress I finished, every customer I helped, every fabric I touched was a tribute to Greta and to the journey that had brought me here. And then there was the personal transformation. Wearing the dresses, embracing my identity fully, wasn't just a legal strategy anymore. It had become a way of life. The skirts, the blouses, the soft fabrics, they were expressions of me. Each time I looked in the mirror, I didn't just see a reflection of my body, I saw confidence, strength, and authenticity. I saw the granddaughter my grandmother had known I could become. That evening, I sat in the quiet of the shop, looking out at the empty street bathed in golden sunset. I thought about the lawyers, Sherman and Vix, and the audacity they had carried into the courtroom. I felt no anger now, only a sense of vindication and peace. They had underestimated me, and in doing so, they had allowed me to discover the full extent of who I truly was. I picked up a dress from the rack, a flowing, pastel-colored gown my grandmother had been working on before she passed. Holding it against myself, I twirled slowly in the quiet of the shop, feeling the fabric brush against my skin. It was liberating, comforting, and affirming all at once. The dress, the shop, the identity I had embraced, they were inseparable. I had become the heir not just in name, but in spirit and essence. The journey ahead would be challenging. Running the shop, designing new pieces, and managing customers would require focus and resilience. But now I had something that went beyond skills or knowledge. I had authenticity, courage, and a deep connection to the legacy I had inherited. That was more valuable than any legal document, more powerful than any challenge Sherman and Vix could throw my way. As night fell, I closed the shop's door, the soft click echoing in the empty room. I paused, taking a deep breath, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The dress shop was more than just a building or a business. It was a sanctuary, a home, and a testament to identity, courage, and love. I knew tomorrow, and every day after, would bring new opportunities to grow, create, and thrive. And I knew I would face each one as Chelsea Hemsworth, the granddaughter, the heir, and the woman I was always meant to be. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. I had poured my heart into the dress shop, restoring the displays, organizing fabrics, and carefully finishing the pieces my grandmother had started. But one particular idea had taken hold of me, a grand showcase to celebrate the reopening of the shop and my grandmother's legacy. It would be the first public presentation under my name, and it was the perfect opportunity to assert not just ownership, but my identity. I spent late nights sketching new designs, experimenting with colors and textures, blending my grandmother's classic elegance with my own vision. Each dress became a reflection of me, feminine, bold, and unapologetically authentic. As I pinned, stitched, and pressed, I thought about Greta, imagining her guiding hand, offering quiet approval and gentle encouragement. This showcase was as much for her as it was for me. The day of the event, the city streets were alive with chatter and anticipation. Flyers had been sent, social media posts circulated, and word of mouth had spread excitement about the Hemsworth dress shop's reopening. I arrived early, slipping into a tailored pastel dress I had designed myself, the skirt flowing gracefully with each step. My reflection in the shop windows showed a woman confident, poised, and ready to claim her place. The first guests trickled in, longtime supporters of the shop, neighbors, and curious passers-by. Their eyes widened in admiration at the transformation. The shop was radiant, bathed in sunlight streaming through freshly polished windows, and the dresses gleamed as though aware they were about to make an impact. I greeted everyone warmly, my hands steady and my smile genuine. Then came the moment I had been both excited for and nervous about, the runway portion of the showcase. A makeshift stage had been set up in the center of the store, and I stood backstage, my hands resting lightly on the fabric of my own dress. My heart raced, a mixture of adrenaline and anticipation. This wasn't just about fashion. It was about stepping fully into myself, displaying courage, creativity, and identity. The first model stepped onto the stage, wearing one of my grandmother's classic designs, and the crowd applauded politely. I watched from behind the curtain, noting how each design elicited reactions, how the fabrics caught the light, how the dresses told stories of elegance, care, and love. But the true moment of truth was approaching, my appearance on that stage. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out from behind the curtain. The applause softened as eyes turned toward me, and for a heartbeat, I felt exposed. Then, I remembered Greta's letters, her unwavering belief in me, and the weeks I had spent preparing for this moment. My posture straightened, my chin lifted, and I let the dress flow around me with natural grace. The room fell silent as I walked down the stage. Each step was deliberate, each movement fluid. The skirts swished softly, the lace detailing caught the light, and the air seemed to shift around me. I was no longer hiding, no longer shrinking to fit others' expectations. I was Chelsea Hemsworth, granddaughter, heir, designer, and woman fully in command of her destiny. The crowd erupted in applause when I reached the end of the stage. Cameras flashed, friends cheered, and even strangers smiled, inspired by the confidence radiating from me. I took a moment to bow gracefully, letting the energy of acceptance and celebration wash over me. In that instant, I realized how far I had come, from hiding in the shadows, fearing judgment, to standing fully visible, fully authentic, fully alive. Sherman and Vix had somehow gotten wind of the showcase, and I noticed them lingering near the back, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and frustration. They had expected me to fail, to falter, to prove their assumption that I was weak or timid. But here I was, thriving, commanding attention, and asserting not just ownership of the estate, but mastery of my identity. Their presence felt irrelevant compared to the joy and affirmation surrounding me. As the showcase continued, I introduced each model and each design, sharing stories of Greta's influence, the inspiration behind the dresses, and my personal journey. The audience was captivated, drawn into the narrative woven into each stitch, each fold, each delicate seam. It was more than a fashion show, it was a testament to courage, authenticity, and legacy. By the end of the event, the shop had transformed into a hub of energy, creativity, and admiration. Guests lingered, discussing designs, offering congratulations, and asking for commissioned pieces. I moved through the crowd with ease, greeting each person with warmth, gratitude, and confidence. The shop felt alive in a way I had never experienced before, infused with my grandmother's spirit and my own vision for the future. As the last guests departed and the evening settled into quiet, I stood alone on the stage surveying the room. The dresses hung elegantly, the mannequins poised as if frozen in time, and the memories of countless hours spent learning, creating, and discovering myself filled the space. I realized that the showcase had been more than a public event. It had been a declaration. I had claimed my place, not just as an heir, but as a woman, a creator, and a person unafraid to embrace her truth. I turned toward the back room, where Greta's favorite fabrics and sketches were stored, and ran my fingers over them. A smile curved my lips as I whispered softly, "Thank you, Grandma. I hope I've made you proud." The air felt charged with warmth and affirmation, as though her presence lingered, watching over the shop, the legacy, and me. For the first time in years, I felt fully complete. I had faced fear, hidden identity, and the arrogance of those who sought to undermine me, and I had emerged victorious. The journey of self-discovery, acceptance, and courage had come full circle, culminating in this moment of empowerment and authenticity. And as I turned off the lights and locked the door for the night, I knew the future was bright. Chelsea Hemsworth, the granddaughter, the designer, the woman, was ready to step boldly into every opportunity that awaited, with confidence, grace, and a heart full of gratitude. The morning after the showcase, the shop felt quieter, almost reverent. The excitement from the previous evening still lingered in the air, a soft hum of creativity and admiration that seemed to infuse every corner. I stood in the center of the room, arms crossed loosely, eyes scanning the racks of dresses, mannequins, and shelves stacked with fabric. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing on borrowed time or hiding behind someone else's expectations. I was exactly where I was meant to be. The phone rang, a familiar chime that usually carried nervous tension, but today it felt different. It was a local reporter, eager to cover the story of the dress shop's reopening and the young woman who had brought Greta Hemsworth's legacy back to life. I answered with a calm, confident voice, ready to share my story with the world, not as a secret, but as a declaration of authenticity. "Chelsea Hemsworth speaking," I said, my words measured and warm. "Miss Hemsworth, congratulations on the successful showcase. People are talking about you and your designs everywhere," the reporter gushed. "Could we schedule an interview? The community wants to hear your story." I smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression of confidence and joy. "Of course. I'd be happy to share it." After hanging up, I took a deep breath and walked to the front window, gazing out at the streets below. People were starting to trickle in again, some curious, some long-time supporters of the shop. Each person who entered brought energy, admiration, and opportunity. The shop was alive, buzzing with possibility, and it all belonged to me. Every fabric, every dress, every memory woven into the walls and shelves. In the quiet of the morning, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The journey had been long, winding, and filled with obstacles. Sherman and Vix had been relentless, the courtroom had been intimidating, and the weight of expectation, both from my grandmother and myself, had been enormous. Yet through it all, I had discovered something far more valuable than an inheritance. I had discovered myself. It wasn't just about the dresses, the estate, or the shop. It was about embracing who I truly was. Every skirt I had worn in secret, every moment of self-exploration, every whispered thought in the solitude of the shop had led me here. I had stepped out of the shadows, faced fear, and emerged unafraid to live authentically. As the day progressed, the shop filled with customers, friends, and neighbors. I greeted each person with warmth, sharing stories of my grandmother, explaining the inspiration behind each design, and weaving my own journey into the narrative. People listened, captivated, and for the first time, I didn't feel judged or hidden. Their admiration wasn't just for the dresses, it was for the courage, authenticity, and grace that radiated from me. Sherman and Vix had tried one last attempt to intimidate me by sending a representative to the shop, but the moment they stepped inside, it became clear they were unwelcome. Their eyes darted around, scanning the racks and displays, looking for a vulnerability that no longer existed. I greeted them with a polite, unyielding smile. "Miss Hemsworth," Sherman said, his tone faltering, I believe the law has spoken," I interrupted gently but firmly, my voice carrying the authority of someone who had claimed her rightful place. "And now, this shop and legacy belong to me. I suggest you respect that and leave." They hesitated, the arrogance replaced by uncertainty, before retreating silently. I let the door close behind them and exhaled deeply. The fear and tension that had haunted me for so long finally melted away. They had underestimated me, and now their presence was meaningless. I was free. The afternoon passed in a blur of creativity and connection. I worked on new designs, helped customers choose fabrics, and even offered a few impromptu sewing lessons. Each action reinforced the reality I had fought so hard to create, a life where I could express myself fully, honor my grandmother's legacy, and thrive in my identity. As evening approached, I found myself standing in the quiet of the shop again, the city lights twinkling through the windows. I ran my fingers over a dress I had designed, a flowing gown with delicate lace and embroidered flowers, and felt a surge of pride and gratitude. This was more than fabric and thread. This was a testament to courage, authenticity, and the love that had carried me through the darkest moments. I thought about the letters from my grandmother, her encouragement echoing through time. Occasionally, we girls need to take a lesson from those dresses we always worked on. You can't stay in the closet forever. My biggest regret is not seeing the beautiful woman you'll grow up to be. Those words had been a lifeline, a guide, and now, as I stood fully visible and fully myself, they resonated more deeply than ever. I closed my eyes and imagined Greta beside me, smiling warmly, proud of the woman I had become. The shop, the dresses, the legacy. It was all a reflection of her care, her wisdom, and her belief in me. And now, I could carry that forward, not just for myself, but for every customer, friend, and future generation who walked through these doors. Later that night, I sat at my grandmother's old desk, the letters and notes spread before me. I felt a deep sense of closure and accomplishment. I had faced fear, hidden identity, and external threats, and I had emerged victorious. But more importantly, I had embraced my truth, honored my grandmother, and reclaimed my life. As I turned off the lights and prepared to leave, I paused one last time. The dresses swayed gently on their racks, the mannequins stood poised, and the shop seemed to hum with quiet life. I whispered softly, almost reverently, "Thank you, Grandma. I promise to carry your legacy with pride, love, and authenticity." Stepping out into the cool night air, I felt the weight of the past lift completely. The stars above seemed brighter, the city quieter, and my heart lighter than it had ever been. I was Chelsea Hemsworth, granddaughter, heir, designer, and woman, and I was finally free. Free to live, to create, to love, and to embrace every part of myself without fear or hesitation. The journey had been long, filled with trials, doubt, and secrecy, but the destination was worth every step. And now, as I walked home with my head held high, the future stretched before me, a canvas as vibrant, beautiful, and limitless as the dresses in my shop.